Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Revenge Never Rests by L.C. Lewis, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me for Chapter 1. Tallie Brown's gaze slipped from the white plaster ceiling of the James family sunny guest room to the sunflower wall clock for what felt like the thousandth time in the last hour. She pushed back against the music playing in her head, a lullaby that made her heart ache and choked her with uncertainty, stealing the peace she'd enjoyed during the early days of her stay at Jackson James' family home. The room had felt like a hug when she arrived a week ago, but no more. The events of the previous evening had stolen that peace, and with it the hope that she could feel whole and worthy of a man like Jackson. Everything, all of her losses, all of her doubts, were tied to the cataclysmic shift in her world that had occurred following the death of Julia Brown, the woman who had raised Tallie. The loss of Julia had left Tallie reeling, but what she really left behind for Tallie to find, a brief note and photo, was much worse. Like the first ball roll in a Rube Goldberg device that had set every other detail in Tallie's world in motion until all that remained were revel and deceit. Tallie had always wondered why her mother had insisted on raising her only child in isolated third world outposts while stressing education in every area from art to combat. Why not a city with people and paved streets and good schools? It was not to be. Julia had been teacher, trainer, and adjudicator, instilling knowledge in Tallie with strict militaristic discipline until, even as a child, she could think like a scientist, track like a predator, and defend herself like a warrior, all while scaling a mountain wall or crossing a plain without leaving a trail. While her successes had won her Julia's respect, questioning the woman's decisions had brought detachment and disappointment. So Tallie had followed directions and obeyed, and then Julia was gone, and Tallie was alone, with nothing but a photo and a few ominous words. I wasn't the mother you deserved. My former choices have always placed you in danger, never more than now. You stand at the fork between two lives. One requires you to change your name, but it keeps the memories of our life together intact. Answers lie along the other one, but so does pain. If this is what you choose, start with the photo. You'll figure out the rest. 2.5 weeks ago, Tallie had started with the photo, which had led her to a dying coal mining town in West Virginia named Cutler's Ridge, on the day a small private jet fell from the sky in a fireball behind the inn owned by Bodie Glick. A disgraced reporter, Jackson James, had been sent there with a career-saving lead about the flight from that very man he blamed for derailing his career. When it became clear that certain facts in their two quests overlapped, Tallie and Jackson formed an alliance, and with the aid of the seemingly misplaced, highly overqualified local librarian, Marlene Bodine, they uncovered how deeply all three of their lives had been manipulated to bring them together for a cause they could not have foreseen. Tallie's life had been the most upended, obliterating everything she thought she knew about her identity. She discovered that Julia Brown was actually Lieutenant Diana Howard, more accurately, Tallie's kidnapper than mother, and that she herself was one of Julia's creations, or at least her persona was. Tallie was actually Molly Kaswell, a twin daughter born to then Captain Mordecai Cai Kaswell and his wife Deirdre. Tallie drew her arm across her moist eyes and flipped onto her side away from the clock, trying to end the agonizing recounting of her 20-plus stolen years. Sorrow at last gave way to fatigue, but somewhere in the space between sleep and awakening, the music returned, and with it the image she happened upon earlier. She had followed the tune and found Jackson's ex-fiancée, Dawn, in his sister Kelly's room, rocking her son, Ethan, and singing with him. Tallie had met them earlier in the evening. The James family had hosted an open house to welcome Jackson home after his long estrangement. When Dawn arrived, she had been swept up in Mr. and Mrs. James's love. The woman had looked so at home there in the James's house, singing to her son like the final puzzle piece Jackson had needed to complete his perfect world. The sweet music and the tender scene pulled at Tallie's broken, motherless heart and made her want to flee. Her training in wits and intellect, the tools upon which she relied, seemed insignificant gifts to offer Jackson compared to the music and gentleness Dawn and her son offered. Tallie's life was a mess, a disaster, and meeting Dawn had increased those feelings of inadequacy. The woman was stylish and pretty with curled hair and makeup and painted nails. Before getting ready for bed, Tallie had looked at her own appearance in the mirror. She was tall and strong and dressed for function rather than fashion, in cargo shorts, hiking boots, a t-shirt, and thick socks. She'd never really done anything more with her wheat-colored hair than pass a comb through it and bind it up in a ponytail or braids. Jackson said she was pretty, but if she was, she figured it was a tomboy kind of pretty, not like the loveliness of this woman who sang sweet songs. 2 more tears broke free as her feelings of inadequacy encroached. She flipped over again and was nearly asleep when the disturbing blare of an Amber Alert brought her fully awake. The last threads of her miserable thoughts left her sweat-soaked and shaking, yet she counted the alert a blessing, in answer to a silent prayer for her plaguing reverie to end and take away the swelling self-doubt. Self-doubts. Prayer. She barely understood such spiritual things or the God whom they were offered. God and prayer were as foundational to Jackson as home and family, but as delicious as these concepts were to Tallie, they were not as easily mastered as tying off a line. Like the song, they added to her personal struggle to be enough, leaving her feeling more inconsequential than they had since she was a child. She dressed quickly and grabbed her new phone and the coordinating watch Jackson had helped her pick out before they'd caught their flight to Idaho. She didn't need the ability to talk to someone through her wristwatch, but Jackson had convinced her that she would come to appreciate all its functions. Mostly she'd agreed it was time to begin anew, and that would be best accomplished by tossing the old phone, Julia's phone, aside, along with all of its reminders of their fractured past. The future was still unclear. She and Jackson had just helped solve the mystery surrounding the murder of Deidre and Megan Kaswell, her birth mother and twin sister, the passengers killed in a fateful plane crash in Cutler's Ridge along with the pilot. Tallie had never known them and never would. Theirs was a love she could never enjoy and she had never enjoyed nor would ever enjoy. But out of the ashes had come some hope. Cai Kaswell, now a general, was still alive. He was the father she had never known and a man of power. In return for Tallie's efforts to protect the crash site of his wife and daughter, the general had come to meet Tallie, offering her and Jackson jobs on his security and PR details. Before she could begin another round of self-examination, the alert sounded again, and she left her self-pity behind to read the accompanying message. A recently adopted child had become lost after wandering away from her new parents' campsite. It wasn't far from the James family farm. So much about the situation picked at the raw wounds still plaguing Tallie. A lost child, lost parents, a lost home, new parents, and new home. She felt the child's fear and pain. She wanted to shout her own story to her father, to tell him, "I'm Molly, I'm your daughter." But how could he believe such a ludicrous tale? She tried not to hope for such a thing. She'd known enough disappointment. Instead, she would at least get to know him as she worked beside him, even though she might never be able to claim him as her father or be claimed by him. Small dreams, small hopes. Those were safe anchors. Right now, her small dream was to find this lost child and return her to the parents who loved her. Helping her would be a balm to Tallie, a reminder that she was useful and valuable, so without more than a moment's thought, she packed her things. She had never really unpacked more than the necessities for each day. She was grateful she had resisted Jackson's suggestion to leave her packed bag behind and bring a small suitcase instead. Julia had taught her to pack for emergencies, so she carried carabiners and ropes, plus a handgun, a medical kit, and other necessities, including her laptop. At times, she wished she could leave the need to prepare for disaster behind and simply relax, feeling comfortable and enough at ease to carry nothing but a lipstick and a brush in a purse. She wondered if Jackson saw her as knotted up or constantly on defense. Was that why he urged her to carry a suitcase instead? She set that concern aside and returned her focus to the alert. She hefted her expedition pack onto her back and headed down the stairs of the James's family's quiet, darkened house. After scribbling brief notes to the family and to Jackson on pages torn from a pad of shopping lists magnetically attached to the fridge, she was out the door and into the darkness. As deficient as she was in social interactions, she still knew her exit was rude and thoughtless, but that concern was less discomforting than the thought of staying around to face Jackson and his family in the morning. She called a ride on a bread truck, driven by a man who respected her unwillingness to chat. When Tallie mentioned her destination, the man seemed to understand her urgency. He dropped her off at the turnoff as another car whizzed past. Tallie uttered a terse thank you and was out of the vehicle before the truck tires stopped rolling. She hurried on to the direction the car went. It led her to the camping area where several sheriff's department's vehicles were parked. Then, before disappearing from view. The smell of the warm woodlands revitalized her. She was back in her element, energized and happy to be useful. She walked up to the man wearing the sheriff's badge and said, "My name's Tallie Brown. I came to help you find the missing little girl." The sheriff's brow wrinkled as he looked at her. "You did you? How'd you even know about her? I sent out the Amber Alert 5 minutes ago." The man was either mistaken about the time frame or simply dismissing Tallie, but she wasn't deterred. She'd met similarly patronizing people when she and Julia had answered distress calls in the past. She'd also seen those people's looks shift to respect and even awe once they saw her determination, strength, and skill, and she hoped it would be so in this case. "All I know is I received your alert and came as fast as I could. I'm an experienced tracker. I can help." The sheriff scanned her tall, youthful frame and wrote her off again, calling for assistance. "Deputy Kirkham, would you please escort this young lady away?" The deputy arrived and took her arm to lead her away, but Tallie tightened every iron-like muscle in her body and anchored her 5'7", rendering him unable to move her. When the sheriff teased him over his failure, Tallie pulled out her U.S. Park Service credentials and showed the man. He turned the credentials over and read every word, then called her bluff and phoned the ranger station at the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington State, where her former boss, Chief Ranger Lewis Barber, answered. Tallie could hear Lewis proudly roll off her resume of degrees and awards, confirming that she was, in very deed, uniquely qualified to head into the forest at night when others dared not, his words assuring Tallie that he still had her back. Until recently, he'd been the closest thing to a father she had ever known, and the soothing sound of his voice and his words of approval steadied her once again. She heard him ask to speak to her, and then the sheepish officer extended the phone her way. She took it and said, "Lewis?" "Oh, Tallie, I'm so relieved to finally hear from you. I've been reading a lot of things, and well, let's just say I'm glad to know you're there using your talents." "Thanks. And hey, listen to me. Whatever happened between you and Julia, don't discount what she taught you. You're amazing. They're lucky to have you, so go do what you do best."